The days of the European free ride are not just numbered, they are over, finished, done. For 70 years, the American taxpayer has been the silent financier of a socialist utopia across the Atlantic, subsidizing their healthcare, paying for their defense, and allowing them to tax our innovations while we bleed trillions in trade deficits. But today, the bill has finally come due. We are watching a geopolitical earthquake unfold in real time, and the mainstream media is terrified to tell you the truth because it shatters their entire globalist worldview. They want you to think this is just a meeting that went wrong. It is not. This is the end of the post-war order and the beginning of American accountability. Let's set the scene because you need to understand the absolute humiliation that just occurred in Washington. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen arrived with what she called Agenda 2026. She walked into the Oval Office expecting the usual ritual, the forced smiles, the empty handshakes, and the eventual signing of a check drawn on the bank account of the American worker. She expected to lecture the United States on climate goals and digital regulations while her own continent burns economically. But that is not what happened. Sources confirm that her agenda, the paperwork she brought to dictate terms to the United States, was physically thrown in the trash, literally discarded. That image alone tells you everything you need to know about the new power dynamic. The United States is no longer interested in listening to the demands of a continent that has refused to pay its own way for 3 generations. Instead of a negotiation, the European delegation was handed a ledger of debt. And when you look at the numbers in this ledger, when you actually see what has been stolen from our economy, it makes your blood boil. We are talking about a $350 billion trade deficit with the Eurozone in the last 12 months alone. $350 billion. That is not just a number, that is stolen wealth. That is American factories closed. That is American wages stagnant. That is American communities hollowed out so that Germany can have a budget surplus and France can retire at 62. We have been absorbing their excess production while they block our goods and tax our tech companies. And that brings us to the second count in this indictment against the European Union, the technology theft. For years, Europe has treated Silicon Valley not as a partner, but as a prey. They cannot innovate, they cannot build a Google, they cannot build an Apple, they cannot build a Tesla. Their regulations are so suffocating that innovation dies on the vine. So what do? They implement predatory digital service taxes. They treat American success as a crime to be fined. They use American tech companies as a piggy bank to fund their failing social programs. But the ultimatum delivered this week puts an end to that racket. The demand is simple. Drop the digital taxes immediately or face the wrath of Section 301 of the Trade Act. And we are not talking about small tariffs here. We are talking about a hammer blow to the European automotive industry. Look at the markets. They know what's coming. The German DAX index crashed 4.5% the moment the news broke. Why? Because Volkswagen and BMW and Mercedes are terrified. They know their business model depends entirely on the American consumer. They know that without the open access to the American market, which they have abused for decades, their profit margins evaporate. They are staring into the abyss of a 25% tariff on luxury goods and automobiles, and they have no backup plan. And it gets worse for them. The security umbrella, the most expensive welfare program in human history, is being folded up. The United States has demanded $80 billion in retroactive defense dues. $80 billion, and frankly, that's a discount. For decades, we have spent 3.54% of our GDP on defense. We patrol the shipping lanes, we maintain the nuclear deterrent, we station troops on their borders to protect them. And what do? Spain spends barely 1%. Italy is a joke. They stripped their militaries to the bone to fund generous welfare states, laughing all the way to the bank because they knew Uncle Sam would send the Marines if anything ever happened. We have created a situation where Europe is a geopolitical teenager, refusing to move out of the house, refusing to get a job, and demanding an allowance while they criticize how we run the household. Those days are gone. The ultimatum is clear. Pay the $80 billion in back dues within 30 days, or the security guarantee is void. Think about what that means. Without American logistics, without American intelligence, without American heavy lift capability, Europe is defenseless. They have been exposed as a paper tiger. Emmanuel Macron is frantically calling for a European army. It is delusional. You cannot build an army in 30 days. You cannot build a military-industrial complex when you have spent 50 years deindustrializing your nations in the name of green energy policies that don't work. The panic in the European capitals is palpable. We are seeing reports of intercepted calls between Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz that sound like absolute chaos. They are terrified. Ursula von der Leyen is fighting for her political survival. There are now allegations surfacing, and we need to dig into this, that EU funds were misappropriated to fund NGOs that actively campaigned against American interests. Think about the betrayal. They take our trade money, they take our defense protection, and then they use that money to fund political operations designed to weaken us from within. It is parasitic. There is no other word for it. And now the people of Europe are waking up too. But they aren't waking up to blame America. They are waking up to blame their own incompetent leaders. We are seeing the early signs of massive civil unrest, strikes in France, protests in Germany. The Yellow Vest movement was just a warm-up act for what happens when the German auto industry lays off tens of thousands of workers because they can't sell cars to America anymore. The euro is crashing against the dollar because global capital is not stupid. Money goes where it is treated best, and it flees from stagnation. The world sees that the European Union is an emperor with no clothes. It is a regulatory superstate built on a foundation of American generosity. And now that the generosity has been withdrawn, the foundation is crumbling. This next 30 days is going to determine the future of the Western world. If Europe refuses to pay, if they refuse to drop the taxes, if they refuse to treat us with reciprocity, then they have chosen their own demise. They will face a trade war they cannot win. They will face a security vacuum they cannot fill. They will face a political revolution from their own citizens who will demand to know why their leaders picked a fight with the only superpower that matters. Or they can capitulate. They can pay the bill. They can admit that the free ride is over. They can accept the status of a vassal state that must finally contribute to its own survival. Either way, the United States wins. For the first time in a long time, Washington is acting in the interest of its own citizens. We are no longer the world's policeman, we are no longer the world's piggy bank, and we are no longer the world's doormat. The ledger of debt is open, the invoice has been sent, and this time, payment is mandatory. Stay vigilant. The media will try to spin this. They will cry about isolationism. They will cry about breaking alliances. Ignore them. An alliance where one side pays for everything and the other takes everything is a scam. And the scam is officially over.